My family lived like royalty in a vacation home I paid for while mocking my 12-hour shifts every day. When Mom said, "You're basically our maid with a wallet," I laughed until I froze their bank account and watched them beg for groceries. It all came to a head when I was FaceTiming my mom after a 12-hour shift. She was sipping wine on the deck of my vacation home, laughing while I sat in my scrubs, barely keeping my eyes open. "Mom, you're basically our maid with a wallet." Me, laughs awkwardly. Mom, no, seriously. You work, we enjoy it. It's a perfect system. That was the moment something inside me snapped. And within 72 hours, I shut everything down. The house, the bank cards, the utilities. I watched from afar as they unraveled, the same people who mocked me now desperate and cold. I haven't looked back since. I never thought I'd be the type to go no contact with my family. I always imagined that, no matter how messy or frustrating they were, blood would keep us loosely bound together. But I guess everyone has their limits, and I reached mine last winter. For context, I'm a 34 female, a trauma nurse in Boston. I work 12-hour shifts, sometimes 14 when things get bad, which is often. It's exhausting, but I genuinely love my work. I've been financially independent since I was 19, put myself through nursing school, and over the last decade, slowly clawed my way into a position where I could afford a few luxuries, one of which was a cozy vacation home in the White Mountains of New Hampshire. I bought it with peace in mind. A place where I could unplug from the chaos, sip coffee while looking at the snow-covered pines, and recover from the emotional wreckage that healthcare leaves behind. It was never meant to be more than that. My family, on the other hand, they saw it differently. I come from a small town near Albany, New York. Middle child. My older brother Leon 38M has always had a bit of a superiority complex. He works a mid-level government admin job and believes the world owes him patience and applause for doing the bare minimum. My younger brother Troy 32 male has never held a job longer than 8 months and prides himself on being a free spirit. My parents, Monica and Daniel, are codependent to a fault, think emotionally manipulative but outwardly charming. Growing up, there were always these subtle digs. If I succeeded, it was either luck or selfish ambition. If I failed, it was proof I should have stayed closer to the family and followed their way. Still, I did my best to stay in touch. I visited during holidays, helped with bills when emergencies popped up, and sent thoughtful gifts. But I always kept a respectful distance. Until I didn't. It started when I posted a photo of the vacation home on Facebook. Just a little shot of the living room with a fire going. My mom called me the next day, oozing with charm. "That place looks beautiful, sweetheart. You must be so proud." I was. I told her it wasn't anything huge, just a modest cabin, but it made me happy. A few days later, she called again. This time, with a request. "You know, your father and I were thinking, we'd love to stay there for a bit. Just for a month or two while we sort things out. It's hard at home with the roof situation and the plumbing acting up again." I should have seen it coming. I really should have. Still, guilt did its job. I told them they could stay there temporarily, on the condition that they treated it with respect. I added them as authorized users for the utilities in case they needed to handle anything urgent. I even gave them access to my grocery delivery account because my dad had been complaining about long drives to the store in the cold. A month turned into 2. Then 3. At first, I didn't think too much of it. I was working constantly, and aside from the occasional photo or thank you text, they didn't say much. But one night, out of exhaustion, I opened Instagram instead of my work email. That's when I saw it. Troy, standing shirtless on the deck, filming a video with the caption, "Life in the mountains, no stress, no grind." Leon, posting a photo of a lavish dinner with the location tagged, "Mountain Escape." And then the kicker, my mom on Facebook Live, giving her friends a tour of her vacation home, casually referring to it as their second property. I watched in stunned silence as she smiled into the camera and said, "We worked hard our whole lives. It's nice to finally enjoy the fruits of it." That night, I didn't sleep. I told myself I would confront them calmly. That I would explain how this felt. But then life happened, work piled up, patience crashed, the world demanded my attention, and I kept pushing the conversation aside. Then came the night that ended it all. I had just finished a 14-hour shift. I called my mom just to check in. I don't even know why, honestly. Maybe out of habit. She answered while lounging in a robe on the porch. The fire pit was going. There was a charcuterie board on the table behind her. The wind chimes I had picked out on a random weekend trip were gently clinking in the background. "Riss," she said, using a nickname I hated, "you sound tired. You need to rest more. Or you'll burn out." I muttered something about how I didn't have the luxury. She laughed and sipped her wine. "You know what we were saying the other day? You're basically our maid with a wallet." I blinked. "What?" She laughed again. "I mean, you work, we live. You don't even come up here. We're the ones enjoying it. It's the perfect system." I gave a short laugh. Out of disbelief, mostly. She kept smiling like she hadn't just gut-punched me. That call lasted less than 5 minutes. When it ended, I didn't cry. I didn't scream. I didn't even feel angry. I just sat there, cold, drained, hollowed out. And then I opened my laptop. I logged into every single platform tied to that house. The property management account, the utilities, the grocery service. I revoked access. I removed names. I changed passwords. I canceled scheduled deliveries and froze the backup card they had been using. Then I waited. The first call came 2 days later. It was Troy. "Hey, weird question, did the Wi-Fi go out?" I was uploading a video and the signal dropped. I didn't answer. Next was my mom, "The heat isn't working. Can you check on the gas bill?" Then Leon, "The card was declined at the grocery store. We just need a quick fix." I stayed silent. By day 3, the tone shifted. Panic. Anger. Confusion. They had no idea what was going on. I let them squirm. Let them feel the chaos they'd created. I watched through our home security system, something I hadn't touched in months, as they packed up their things in a flurry of frustration and cold. It was snowing that day. The temperature had dropped into the teens. I don't think they were prepared for how harsh the mountains could be when they weren't wrapped in privilege. They drove back to Albany that afternoon. I still haven't spoken to them. Not really. They've sent messages. Long, angry emails from Leon. Snarky texts from Troy. Voicemails from my mom, pretending nothing had happened. Each one more manipulative than the last. I've ignored them all. But something tells me the worst isn't over yet. What followed in the weeks after I shut everything down was like watching a script unfold that I'd read 1,000 times in my head, only this time, I wasn't playing my part. My mom's first real attempt at communication after the utilities fiasco came through a cheerful-looking email titled "Let's Talk." Inside was a tone-deaf message that felt both dismissive and guilt-laced, like she couldn't decide if I was her benefactor, her daughter, or her latest personal crisis manager. "Hi, sweetheart. Hope you're well. We noticed some changes with the house. Are you switching service providers? Let us know if you need help with anything. Also, your father says thanks again for everything you've done. You've always been so giving. Let's not let anything silly come between us, okay? Family first. Love, Mom." No apology. No accountability. Just confusion and a passive pat on the head. I didn't respond. Leon was less subtle. A week later, he sent a blistering wall of text. I read it on my lunch break and felt physically sick by the time I got to the bottom. "You're acting like some kind of victim here. Newsflash, you invited us. You gave us access. No one forced you to pay for anything. If you're feeling resentful, that's on you, maybe because you've alienated yourself from the family for years. What happened to having each other's backs? I guess your fancy job really went to your head. He ended it by accusing me of weaponizing money and punishing them for enjoying life. Troy didn't send anything direct for a while. Instead, he started making passive-aggressive posts online, Instagram stories that said things like, "Some people love playing savior until you stop clapping for them," and "Never trust the sibling who keeps receipts." By the end of that month, I'd blocked them all on social media. But even as I shut those doors, a part of me kept checking my email, my voicemail, my texts, not because I wanted reconciliation, but because I needed to understand just how far they'd go to rewrite the story. And they went pretty far. One afternoon, my manager called me into her office. Apparently, someone had left a voicemail at the hospital, claiming I was misusing funds and taking advantage of vulnerable family members by coercing them into silence. They didn't name themselves, but the references were specific enough to make it obvious who it was. Thankfully, my manager knew me well enough to let it roll off. But the embarrassment of having my professional space tainted by family drama was enough to send me home early that day. I sat in my apartment, curled up on the couch with my legs tucked under me, drinking chamomile tea and staring at my phone like it was a loaded weapon. The silence was starting to feel heavier than the noise. Even without speaking, they found ways to haunt my headspace. I'd pass a winter coat in the closet that reminded me of the one Mom always wore when she visited. I'd spot the maple syrup in my pantry and think about that breakfast Troy once made, the only time he lifted a finger in that house. And yet, despite everything, I couldn't stop myself from opening the security cam app every once in a while to check on the property. It was empty, as it should be. Pristine. Silent. No more voices echoing off the cedar walls. No more laughter at my expense floating through the mountain air. Just the wind and the creak of the porch swing. Eventually, I deactivated the cameras altogether. I didn't need to watch anymore. I'd seen all I needed to. Still, the emotional unraveling that followed wasn't immediate. The anger, sure, that came in waves, sudden and blinding. But the grief? That snuck in quietly. I'd cry at random, in the car, during TV commercials, folding laundry. Not for them. But for the version of me that used to believe they might someday be proud of me. The girl who thought that love, in her family, was something you could earn if you just gave enough. Therapy helped. Slowly. Janice, my therapist, was kind, direct, and unafraid to ask hard questions. "What did you learn from this, Larissa?" "That I'm not crazy for wanting boundaries," I said once, during a session where I had trouble meeting her eyes. She nodded. "And?" "That I don't owe my peace to people who never protected it." That one stuck with me. I wrote it down in my journal later that night and underlined it 3 times. Meanwhile, my parents found new ways to test my boundaries. They started calling my cousin Daphne, a sweet, soft-spoken woman I used to be close with, and feeding her stories about how I'd banished them for a joke and was withholding basic support. Daphne, bless her heart, reached out to me with concern, asking if something was wrong and saying my mom had sounded fragile. I told her the truth, not in rage, but in clarity. I explained how the arrangement started, what was said, what was taken for granted, and what was ultimately weaponized against me. I told her I didn't expect her to pick a side, but I did ask that she not act as a go-between. She apologized profusely, and I could tell from her silence that she was processing more than she'd expected. "I'm so sorry, Larissa," she said quietly. "They made it sound so different. I had no idea. It's always like that with them. They don't burn bridges. They rot them, slowly, quietly, until the whole thing collapses and they act like it was the wind." About 3 months after the initial fallout, I finally visited the vacation house again. I brought my dog, a mutt named Roscoe, and we stayed for 3 days. Just me, him, and the clean, undisturbed air. There were little signs of their presence, a chip in the ceramic dish I'd loved, a faint watermark on the wood table where they'd clearly ignored the coasters. A closet with hangers missing. But no major damage. Just enough to remind me how entitled they felt to treat my space as theirs. I poured a glass of wine that night and sat on the porch, wrapped in a wool blanket, watching the stars. The kind of peace I'd longed for when I first bought the place finally wrapped itself around me. It wasn't loud. It wasn't triumphant. It was just still. And in that stillness, I realized something I hadn't quite grasped until then. I had spent so many years trying to prove I could be generous and successful and selfless all at once that I forgot I didn't owe anyone proof of anything. They had taken from me because I allowed it. Because I mistook proximity for intimacy. Because I believed that giving enough would fix something broken in them. It didn't. And maybe it was never supposed to. About a week after my quiet return to the cabin, I received a certified letter in the mail. At first, I thought it might be related to property taxes or insurance, the kind of boring homeowner stuff you dread until you realize it's just paperwork. But when I opened the envelope and saw my family attorney's name on the letterhead, someone I hadn't spoken to in nearly 6 years, my stomach dropped. It was a formal notice. Request for mediation. Filed by none other than my mother, Monica. Apparently, they'd contacted him to explore legal remedies to what they were now framing as a verbal lease agreement gone wrong. They were claiming that I had offered them extended use of the property, including utilities and shared financial resources, in exchange for caretaking services and household management, which, of course, was complete fiction. I stared at the document, numb. This wasn't a petty text or an angry voicemail anymore. This was escalation. They were trying to manipulate the legal system the same way they'd manipulated emotions. Twist the truth just enough to make themselves look like victims. Position themselves as dependents wronged by the very daughter who had been bankrolling their mountain fantasy. I called my own attorney, a no-nonsense woman named Renee who had helped me once before when I dealt with an ex-roommate who tried to squat in my condo. She read through the letter and laughed bitterly. "Larissa, they don't have a case. There's no contract. No signed agreement. No proof of financial contribution. It's absurd." Still, she advised me to reply formally, just in case they tried to drag it further. I remember sitting down to write my rebuttal, carefully, calmly. I listed the original verbal terms. I noted the lack of any rent, maintenance, or utility contributions from their side. I included screenshots of conversations where they thanked me for letting them stay, not hiring them or leasing anything. It was clean, quiet, and professional. But when I sent it, I felt something deeper than anger, a sorrow that sat in my chest like concrete. It was one thing for them to take. It was another to laugh in my face while they did it. But this legal theater? It confirmed something I think I'd been avoiding for a long time. They didn't see me as family. Not really. I was a resource. A vault with feelings they didn't understand and boundaries they refused to accept. After that, things went strangely quiet for a while. No letters. No calls. No passive-aggressive posts. It felt eerie. Like the silence between tremors. I stayed busy. Took extra shifts. Started painting again in the evenings, nothing professional, just abstract stuff that made the apartment feel more like mine. I made time for walks in the public garden, caught up with friends I hadn't seen in years. And I kept going to therapy. Still, even as the weeks passed, I found myself waking up in the middle of the night, heart pounding, convinced there was another message waiting. Another shoe about to drop. And eventually, it did. But not in the way I expected. It was a Sunday in April when I got a call from Daphne, the same cousin who had tried to stay neutral during the fallout. I almost didn't pick up, but something in me hesitated. She sounded off. "Larissa," she said quietly, "I know things are really bad with your mom and dad. I'm not calling to talk you out of anything. But, you should know something." She paused, and my throat tightened. "What is it?" "They told Nana and Uncle Joel that you abandoned them financially. That you promised to take care of them and then vanished. Your mom said you cut off their heat in the middle of winter and that you're unstable from work stress." I closed my eyes, bile rising in my throat. They're rewriting everything, I whispered. Yeah, she said. And some people are buying it. Not everyone, but some. Nana keeps saying poor Monica, she sacrificed so much for those kids. And Joel told my dad that you were probably having a breakdown. That last line hit harder than I expected. I had been so focused on surviving the fallout that I hadn't thought about the collateral damage. How my parents, always slaughtered at curating their image, were now recasting themselves as victims of their own daughter's supposed cruelty. I felt rage bubble up, but also this hollow ache underneath it. I hadn't realized how much it would hurt to be misrepresented like that, especially to people I once looked up to. I thanked Daphne for telling me. We talked a little longer. She offered to correct the story where she could, but I told her not to worry about it. They'll believe what they want to believe, I said. They always have. After we hung up, I sat there for a long time, staring at nothing. My phone buzzed. It was a text from Troy. Just one sentence, hope the silence is worth the loneliness. I didn't reply. Instead, I turned off my phone, made a cup of tea, and sat by the window, watching the clouds shift over the city skyline. Because here's what I've learned, people like my family aren't just addicted to what you give, they're addicted to the control that comes with it. The silence you offer is never silence to them. It's defiance. An insult. Proof that you're selfish, disloyal, broken. They don't miss you. They miss the version of you that never said no. But I'm not that version anymore. And if silence is the price of peace, I'll pay it gladly. The next time I heard from any of them directly, it was through an unexpected source. I was in the break room at work, eating a sad hospital cafeteria sandwich, when I got an email from the high school I graduated from back in Albany. It was about an alumni spotlight, something they send out to former students a few times a year. I almost deleted it without reading, but then my eyes caught a name in bold. Leon R. Local leader shares journey from hardship to humble success. I opened it, confused. There was my brother's face, smiling awkwardly in a button-down shirt that still had creases from the packaging. The article painted him as a self-made man, someone who had pulled his family through financial darkness by prioritizing hard work and resilience. He even mentioned how supporting aging parents had taught him to balance responsibility and gratitude. No mention of me. No mention of who actually paid those bills. No whisper of the mountain house. I laughed. Not the kind of laugh that comes from joy. It was quieter. Like something snapping into place. I didn't feel rage this time. Just resolve. Because while they had been busy writing fiction, I had been holding on to every receipt, digital and emotional. And I had finally reached the point where my silence wasn't restraint. It was preparation. That night, I opened my laptop and started writing a document, nothing petty, nothing cruel. Just facts. Dates. Screenshots. Photos. Bank records. Grocery orders. Facebook posts. Snippets from text conversations, all laid out in a timeline that made it crystal clear what had happened. It wasn't emotional. It wasn't even dramatic. It was evidence. Then I reached out to the alumni coordinator. A woman named Sienna who had been 2 grades above me and now handled outreach for the school. I wrote, "Hi Sienna, I wanted to reach out regarding the recent alumni spotlight featuring Leon R. I believe there may be some misunderstandings in the narrative shared in that article. I've attached supporting documents clarifying the financial reality surrounding the claims made. As a fellow alum, I respect the school's values around honesty and community and thought you might appreciate a clearer picture. Warmly, Larissa R." I didn't expect anything to come from it. But 2 weeks later, I got a short reply, "Thank you for this, Larissa. We'll be reviewing the content and making adjustments as necessary." And just like that, the article disappeared from the school's site. The next spotlight featured someone who actually volunteered at refugee clinics. Petty? Maybe. But it was about more than that. It was about truth. That was just the beginning. I also started a small blog, anonymous at first, where I wrote about financial boundaries and family enmeshment. Real stories, not revenge posts. Just reflections and advice from the point of view of someone who had made hard choices. It slowly gained traction. People began to email me, sharing their own stories. A few even recognized pieces of mine from a Reddit post I had once written and connected the dots. So, I stopped hiding. I put my real name on the blog. I posted photos of myself at the mountain house. I shared the story, not out of spite, but as a warning. And the truth did what it always does when you give it light, it grew. I got invited onto a podcast about burnout and toxic family roles. I did a live Q&A with a women's financial empowerment group. I spoke to nurses who were afraid to set boundaries with the people closest to them. And every time I told my story, it took away a little more of their power. Not long after, I was invited to speak at a small conference in Vermont, nothing huge, just a panel discussion about generational expectations and independence. I shared the story again, more polished now, and got a standing ovation. Guess who saw the recording? My mother. She emailed me less than 24 hours later. It wasn't angry. It wasn't cruel. It was desperate. I saw what you said. Is that really how you see us? Is this what you want people to think about their own families? That cutting them off is strength? We weren't perfect, Larissa, but we were your parents. We loved you. We were just trying to survive too. Please, come home. Let's talk. Mom, I didn't reply. Not because I wanted to punish her, but because there was nothing left to say. They hadn't called me when I was promoted. They didn't message me when my blog crossed 100,000 views. They hadn't even reached out when I moved into my new condo, the one I bought with no cosigners, no financial help, no hidden hands. But now that the story wasn't theirs to spin, now they wanted a conversation. I left the email marked unread. Instead, I wrote a new post for the blog. There's no revenge like living the life they said you'd never earn without them. No closure like peace. And no freedom like realizing their guilt no longer fits in your luggage. These days, I go to the cabin often. Not to run away, but to return to myself. I host friends there now, people who understand boundaries and respect space. I decorate for the holidays, just for me. I read books by the fire. I paint again. Sometimes I still see the shadows of the past in the corners. I remember the sound of their laughter echoing off my walls. I remember the way I used to think silence was love. But mostly, I feel safe. I'm not angry anymore. I'm free. And I've learned that sometimes, the best revenge isn't loud or explosive. It's just leaving the door they slammed in your face permanently closed, and building a better one that only opens from the inside.